1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Lay It on the Table, the Southern Board Game Podcast with the accent on Southern. As per usual, I am Joe Mahaffey, one of your hosts, and as always, my partner in crime,
James Englehart. We got the timing right on that one this time, but we're not the only two people here this time, Joe.
We are not. That's why I was really nervous about getting it right, because not only do we have a guest today, but it's the first time ever in the history of the podcast that we've had a guest actually come back.
This is true.
So I teased this a couple of weeks ago that we might have a spoiler alert, but it is our pleasure to once again welcome Jamey Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games to Lay It on the Table. Welcome, Jamey.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm honored that I'm either the first one you asked or the first one who accepted. Either way.
To be truthful, you're the first one we've ever asked.
Okay.
So now we're batting 1,000. This is awesome.
And of course, it's after Gen Con. You're back in your home state. How was Gen Con for you?
Well, I wasn't personally at Gen Con, but my team was there, and they have shared some great stories about the time they had. We have a big booth there that we share with Meeple Source. Wingspan Pocket was maybe the highlight of it, but we also had Duel of Melloc and some other new products there, new expansions that we released this year. So they said they had a great time, and that the tornado that hit Gen Con apparently it didn't hit the specific area where our booth was. So all of my team members were fine. I think everyone there was fine in general, but a few people got wet.
Yeah.
Well, on our last episode, James had speculated that you were in the meeting room in the middle of the booth.
Okay. My coworker Alex, who takes meetings there, was there probably. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say it was always mobbed every time I went past, and I liked the tray of birds that you could just pick out your little bird meeples that you wanted. That was a nice that was pretty fun. I saw people going through that every time.
That's fun. Yeah, Meeple Source makes a lot of different birds, but at least like 3 or 4 dozen different bird tokens that you can use in Wingspan. Yeah.
Yes, we have a lot of them.
I have some of them over here. Yeah.
Yeah, we have very distinct favorites. My wife will only play with one of the, I believe it's the hummingbird.
Okay.
Will be the only one that she plays with, and I only play with the blue jay. So that's our everybody else can choose what they want. Oh, and my daughter always has to choose one of the owls.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the owls. Owls are good.
So it sounds like you've been really busy. Obviously the Wingspan, you know what? It's not even the Wingspan brand anymore. I feel like it's the Span brand, because there's so many different iterations of the flavor of the game, I guess. How has that been in terms of expanding the audience for people that are finding their way to these games? Do you find that they're primarily still people of the Wingspan variety, or people that are kind of coming to it in a different way because they like dragons more than birds or something like that?
I've seen a mix of the two. I mean, one of the reasons we originally decided to spin off into different animals, dragons and then fish for Finspan, is that people kept asking for us to make Wingspan for different animals, but we tried to be really intentional about it. We didn't want to go too far and stretch the brand too thin. And we wanted to focus on a few different animals. And so I think we've seen many Wingspanners carry over and try these other games. But I think the dragon romantasy book genre has coincided well with Wormspan. And so it sells very well in Barnes & Noble. It's probably finding a very different audience there than
100%.
And then it's been interesting that there is an equivalent of birders among people who love fish. It seems that maybe it's fewer people or a different type of person. I don't exactly know, but not quite as many people have gravitated towards Finspan, but enough people are discovering it and finding it and having fun with it. It's just been interesting seeing how the different niches of this game have expanded and how different types of people that they brought in.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the romantasy thing, but that you said that, I was like, oh, yep, no, that definitely makes sense. So I have one sort of question about the Gen Con and the Pocket and Duel of Melloc. They both hit within days, a week or something of each other?
Yeah, they were both. I announced them. I kind of revealed them 1 week back to back after the other. I think Melloc was first, and then Wingspan Pocket, and then they launched at the same time on our web store for people who wanted to just put both in the same order.
So was this my question is this like a lucky happenstance? Y'all just like, yes, everything is going to line up, or was this some genius strategy that y'all had like cooked up in the back?
We've had very few genius strategies here. A lot of it is just how things line up. Like when we always have different projects in the work at different times, and sometimes they just happen to line up in terms of production and shipping and things like that. And sometimes they start off looking that way, and then one project has an issue or one just sails through production and jumps out ahead. These two just happen to coincide to be happening in production at the same time.
Jamey, you'll have to forgive James because he's a poet, not a project manager. And I've seen your workflow on the website. Hello there. And I know very well kind of how those projects kind of go in tandem like that. So I really appreciate that. And from that perspective, sorry, James, did I step on your next question there?
Oh, no. I was just going to say I was also a book editor for many years, so I do understand the project management, and so this was more of a let you take some extra laps if you wanted to. But I also, I mean, it is nice to have two of the. I mean, I imagine that the Scythe and Less Associated Universe and Wingspan and Associated Universe are two big tent poles, so it's not a bad thing to get everybody looking at Stonemaier, I would think.
Yeah, it has been exciting. I mean, kind of the theme of this year so far has been to look at past projects that have brought joy to people's tables and try to look at them through new lenses. Like we started off the year with Wingspan Americas, now we have Wingspan Pocket. Viticulture, the very first game that we published, I had some ideas for an expansion for the first time in a long time, and published Bordeaux earlier this year. And then, Duel of Melloc, which I had, in every way, I thought that I was finished working on Scythe, and then I had this idea for a dueling game between Scythe and Expeditions. And so that was fun to revisit that as well, and hopefully fun for fans to revisit Scythe with a new faction and a new way to play.
Yeah, no, that was a nice way to sweeten that deal quite a bit. It was nice.
Yeah.
Well, and as somebody who travels at least once a year with an ATA case full of games, and I've taken Wingspan to Mexico and the Dominican Republic for work-related trips where I've ended up teaching the game, I'm very excited about Wingspan Pocket because it'll be a lot easier to travel and get through customs.
we recently went to Iceland on a cruise, and I packed Wingspan Pocket, and I even put, there's a little extra room in the box, not much, but a little bit for sleevers essentially. And I packed some other smaller games inside the box. I fit like 4 games into that size, and we played it a bunch on the boat and had a great time with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So looking back over the last 5 years, because I think that, a lot has changed. I mean, 5 years ago, we were in the throes of the pandemic, and that was a completely different time for the gaming industry altogether. Is there one business decision that you guys made that has really paid off far better than you expected during that time frame?
That's a good question. So the pandemic happened right as Wingspan was taking off.
Mm-hmm. Taking flight, you might say.
Taking flight, you might say that, yeah. And so I guess, part of it, probably the biggest one, is that we decided to expand Wingspan to Wormspan and Finspan. That was a big decision that we made a couple years in. I think that was around 2021, maybe 2022, that we really looked at that brand and decided to make a game that was a little bit more complex, a little bit less complex. So that was probably the biggest one. And the result has been that Wormspan is now, I think, our 3rd best-selling product, even though it hasn't been available for all that long. And Wingspan Pocket is our biggest first printing of a game ever. We made 175,000 copies, wow. And they have sold out to distributors now. So we're already kind of trying to make more before the holiday season. So that the ripple effects of those decisions that we made early on, I think we're seeing positive impacts in terms of numbers, but also ultimately we get to reach more people and hopefully bring some joy to them. So yeah, that's one answer. I could probably poke at it from different angles too, but that's a big part of it.
Yeah, no, that I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, we had Frank West on a few weeks ago, and we were talking about, he had Isle of Cats coming out around the same time as the pandemic, and we talked a little bit about that. So I was just kind of curious, from your perspective, what was the impact there and sort of how it's evolved from that point. So that was sort of the genesis of the thought.
Yes, I remember listening to that episode. Frank is always fascinating to listen to, especially the way he was talking a lot in that episode about how he's intentionally kept his business really small. So any decision that he makes he has a lot of flexibility, really, because he's only impacting one person or two, him and his wife, or his partner. I have one of the biggest things that's happened over the last like 5 years at Stonemaier is that I now have 7 coworkers, whereas before that I had technically none. And then I think Joe came on in 2019, 2020. So now every decision that I make or that we make as a team has a pretty big impact on the lives of 8 people and their families. And so I have to try to keep that in consideration. So I'm not only looking to try to make sustainable choices for our customers and their budgets and their tabletops and their priorities, but also 8 people that I really care about, and I want them to be here as long as they want to be here.
No, I appreciate you saying that because I was hoping that we could kind of juxtapose those two conversations, and you went right there. So that was really, really spot on. And I kind of also wonder, with the diversity of the spans in general, um, is there, because James and I have talked about this on the podcast some, is there a mechanic from Wingspan that you felt like you fixed with Finspan or Wormspan? They do play a little differently with the same themes, and I'm just kind of curious. Is there anything that you put in those that you kind of wish that you had retroactively put into Wingspan?
I would almost say it's a little bit more about what we removed from Wingspan. We get a lot of questions about a certain type of power in Wingspan, the once between turns power.
Mhm.
And we had put that in the game originally in Wingspan, and it's still there. We put that in because it gives people kind of a reason to pay attention to other players' turns when it's not your turn. You're hoping that another player will do something. But it's led to a lot of questions, including things about what happens if someone does it right at the end of the round. Does it carry over? Does it not? And so when we were looking at Wormspan and Finspan, we definitely decided to leave that ability out. But there are other abilities in Wingspan, even the end of round ability that wasn't in the original Wingspan game, that was added in the European expansion. We really like that one. That one is less rules ambiguous. It's very easy to add. It ties into the engine building of the game. And so we did tie that into Wormspan. So yeah, it's been a little bit about looking at, and really the community around Wingspan has been so helpful because we get so many questions from people, and so we're able to look at the things that most confused them, like that one example, and try to not put those things in the other games. Is there anything like that you two in teaching these games have continually had to re-explain, or that players have stumbled over that you've noticed that maybe didn't end up in Wormspan or Finspan?
No, I mean, I like what you've said recently about the green powers in Wingspan Pocket, as anticipating that, trying to keep track of all of that. Because I play games like that. I mean, I think we all do, right? Where it's like, okay, there's like, now I have a whole grid of things, and I'm looking at like what's still on every turn. And I think, Wingspan has enough cognitive load for a lot of people to kind of grind their gears a little bit, like, okay, which bird do I need to get now? What do I need to, which food do I need to do this? And so adding more of that I think it's wise to take this stripped down version back there but give it that little boost, which I think is super great. And it doesn't last long. So, you probably can't put out more than 1 or 2 green powers before it's going to be over. So it feels good.
Yeah, I appreciate you being aware of that cognitive overload. And we've had to really keep an eye on that as we've added new expansions for any of these games. Like, how much are we asking players to keep track of and remember?
Well,
that's a big part of it.
My wife, who just briefly interrupted me for another issue that we have going on here at the house, that's why I had to take my headphone off there for a second. She is a player who always is like, it's great, these expansions are great, but sometimes I just love playing the original. And we find ourselves a lot of time with all these games kind of going back to the original Viticulture, the original Wingspan, the original, well, I guess there is just the original Scythe, but
there's
all of
3 expansions, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean the original.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. But from that perspective, though, we also, like when Americas came out, a lot of times when the expansions come out, we will just play with the new expansion cards, unless there is a like the variant when you added the nectar and stuff like that, where you kind of had to have some of those kind of pieces in place. But anyway, the whole point is that she just always, with all the games we have and with the expansions, she's always like, let's just play the original.
Yeah.
Which is kind of her way of doing it, so to speak.
I'm often the same way with a variety of games, but including Wingspan. I think what I often do with Wingspan is that I'll play essentially the original, but with all the cards. I don't
Yeah.
separate the cards out, and that I appreciate that Wingspan is mostly playable that way. There's a few cards I might draw that I'm like, okay, I can't. I don't have Nectar in place, so I can't play this card. I'll draw again. But I like it when I like more stuff expansions in general, where it's just
Mhm.
more of the same, and I don't have to separate it from then on.
Well, I can honestly say I have played a game of Wingspan. It was just the original with all the original components where we actually ran out of eggs, but we've never run out of cards. So,
Yeah.
so that's fair.
So I want to. So we had talked about me editing for just a second earlier, and I want to return to that because I had a question for you built around that out of a recent experience. So I teach writing. I've worked as an editor. Joe mentioned I was a poet as well, right? And I recently played Greyloon a couple of times after fighting the rule book of that thing. And in contrast, Stonemaier rule books are always a nice, comfortable experience. I feel like I'm going to sit down. They also feel nice, so that's good. And so I'm interested, and this is maybe feels inside baseball, but I'm curious about it, about how y'all approach rule books as such. Does it start with like a bare bones thing and you start adding tendons and muscles and all, or do you have a big, meaty, robust thing and then start pulling things away? I don't know. The food thing just happened. I don't know. So, but yeah, I'm just interested in what that process was like.
Yeah, well, I can speak mostly. So there are a few games designed by other designers where they write the rule book and then we're kind of editing it throughout the process. But for that enters the process in the same way as any other rule book. But when I'm working on a game, when I have entered the phase where I need people to play test it and I'm not going to be there, blind play testing, that's when I'm working on the rule book. I have a kind of a basic template that I work on for our rules. But every rulebook has different needs, and so I'm cultivating that rulebook based on that. But a lot of the work of the rulebook is tied to that blind playtesting. I get a lot of questions, especially in the first few rounds of blind playtesting, of things that were in my head that I just didn't think to put in the rulebook. And I've gotten pretty good at doing that, but still, there are things that are obvious to the designer that are not going to be obvious to playtesters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're there. I need those questions, even the obvious questions, so I can put that obvious stuff in the rulebook. We've also tried to hone our oversight process. So that's all the early building the rulebook. Then we get to the late stages where we're copy editing it, proofreading it, looking at it over and over again. And also now when we get an early copy of the game from our printer and we playtest that version. And the thing that I found that's really helpful at that stage is at that point, I have not played the game for a month or two because it's been at the printer while they review the digital files. And that's really good, I find, because it means that even I might have rules questions. And if I can't find the rules questions in the rule book, that is a big sign that that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so that playtest has been really, really enlightening for me and my coworkers. We all really poke at the rule book during that stage and try to improve it. Wingspan Pocket went through major iterations and changes as a result of some of that playtesting.
It's funny. You just say that basically you step away from the game for like a month, 6 weeks, and then come back to it, which is the same advice we give writing students. You generally can't do this in the course of a semester, but it's like, put the poem aside, put the story aside, walk away from it, come back, and you'll think, what the hell? Why did I? And yeah, it'll become obvious to you as you're working back through it. So that's great. That's good to hear.
I like that. Yeah, and I'm glad most of the rule books have worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
I think there are looking back, there are certainly improvements that I think that we could make, and we have made them. They made them on reprints. But getting a lot of different people to look at the rule books, and even actually now we recently added a new step where we're using software called Page Proof to look over our rule books. And the biggest thing that's happening, or the two big positives that come from Page Proof, are one, proofreaders can look at it simultaneously, whereas previously, like, I would have one proofreader work on it. I would look over those changes. Maybe we would incorporate them, or maybe I would just send that file to the next proofreader. But now they can work on it at the same time, and they can tag the designer while they're doing so. And so if they're making a change that might actually impact the design a little bit, like on a card or something like that,
Wow.
they can just tag the designer and say, hey, what's the intended meaning here? Am I changing the meaning by changing this word or not? And we can fix it on the fly.
That's good.
It's meant that there's a lot more conversation on those files. It's a little bit more work for our graphic designer, but I think the end impact will be really, really positive.
What
And
I've
the
always
graphic design is
appreciated.
lovely, very, very user friendly. Yes, Joe, I stepped on your line, sir. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. You know, he's getting ADD Joe today along with James. Um, no, I just have always appreciated how you're really out there in your mediums, whether it's YouTube or your blogs or what have you, that really talk a lot about the way you think about the quality of the work that goes into the box and the type of paper and the way that you structure the rule book. I think we had a conversation with the designer of Spirits of Christmas back in December, and we talked a little bit about that because it's interesting to see how designers that are either that one man shop or people that are getting into it are really influenced by the advice that you just freely give away from your experience. And I think that's just really, really a cool thing.
I learn a lot from other designers and publishers too, but I'm honored that some people do that, and I'm a huge gamer, and so if I ever see, and if I've made any sort of positive impact on other games, I'm benefiting from it because I'm probably playing those games.
Well, with that as a backdrop,
Yeah.
what game has given you the biggest I wished I had designed that feeling?
I mean, I have a bunch of games like that. What's one that's fairly recent that maybe I played? Actually, there's a little one that I've really enjoyed called Three Chapters by Joe Hout. It's a little game it's like a little bit, it's a round of drafting, then it's a round of trick taking, and then there's a round of tableau scoring. It's a really elegant, streamlined game, but it's brought me a lot of joy recently, and it's a game that shows a lot of restraint, which I have a problem doing. If you've seen the box for Vantage, you can see no restraint at all in Vantage. But that's something that I'd like to have a little more skills at having that restraint. And I admire what Joe did in Three Chapters. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's always nice to get other people's perspective on that because, you know, I wonder with like Wingspan Pocket, are we gonna see other pocket based Stonemaier games in that genre? Sort of like we've seen the Roll and Write,
Rolling Realms, yeah.
Which I commented a couple of episodes back that is one mechanic that I haven't really embraced, the whole Roll and Write realms, whatever. Because it's just not something that speaks to me, but I do like the idea of having, you know, different variants. I'm also the guy that wonders why am I a snob because I don't play Catan ever. So, no.
Well, we were waiting to see how Pocket did, how people responded to it, not just in terms of sales, but were people actually playing it? Were they having fun with it? And that seems to be the case so far.
Mhm.
And so we are starting to dabble into, at least initially in the Span brand, maybe a Wormspan Pocket, maybe a Finspan Pocket. We haven't really looked at our other games in that way, but I guess it's possible that we could look at some of them. Is there a Stonemaier game? What's Stonemaier game that would you really like to have a pocket version of?
I'm going to say viticulture, but I don't know how hard that would be.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
just
you
one of those. So there's certain gateway games that are part of our, you know, my wife and I have as a vocabulary, right? Wingspan's definitely a big part of that. Viticulture was definitely one of those. I mean, it's one of those. I judge certain games by, I have two daughters, one's 27, the other one's 31. When they come to our house and we want to play a game and maybe we have a new game that we're excited about, there's there's 3 games that they go back to. We already talked about Frank, so we'll leave him over there. But the other two are always Viticulture and Wingspan. And to me, to be able to say, okay, we're spending time with our adult children, they want to spend time with us, and this is how they want to spend their time. You know, to me, that is just something that we really embrace. And then when we go out, 9 times out of 10, when I'm introducing somebody to the hobby, I'm using Wingspan as that game just because I'm really proficient at teaching it. And I can help people get into it very quickly. And nine times out of 10, they end up buying the game. In fact, there's a client of mine who's here in North Carolina, and I recommended it to him and his wife, and they've just been having an amazing time with it. So it's just one of those things that that I like to be able to evangelize, and then having other versions of that game, like a pocket size, say, well, yeah, that seems complex to you. Maybe we ease you into it this way. You're used to playing cards, right? You know, and I think that those are great ways to think about it.
So do you think,
I wasn't
Jamie, I
gonna
want to hear
say-
your answer too, but moving forward, Joe, do you think there are some people to whom you will introduce Wingspan right off the bat and others to whom you'll use Wingspan Pocket? Like, will you base it on what you know about them as a person or as a gamer?
I think it probably has more to do with where I am and how I'm traveling, because I do travel a bit. So like like when my wife and I go on the trips to, like a resort or something, it's easy to say I'm taking the ATA game and we check it, or the ATA case and we check it with a few games. But when I travel for work, like I was in Dallas last week, that's unsustainable. But putting a copy of Pocket in my bag and being able to pull it out if you're stuck at the airport with a flight that's delayed because of a thunderstorm, or you're with coworkers and you're trying to decompress after a day of work, to me that is a venue that I think would make sense. And then plus just going to, like, friends and family events, it's easy to just kind of pull out and say, well, if nothing better to do, I got this Pocket thing here, right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So that's the way I think about it. I haven't really thought about it from the standpoint of would I choose one over the other, because a lot of times if we're being deliberate about meeting somebody at a game store or inviting them to our house, we're going to do games. Not as regularly as James does on his game night, but every Saturday.
No, once a month, but yeah. And I think I have that similar. The Pocket is quick, it's clean, it's easy to set up and put back away, right? And so I think it's more a question of convenience than it is necessarily weight. Although if I know people haven't played a lot of games, I'd probably go with Pocket just because the rules overhead is lower, right? I mean, it still has stuff going on. I wouldn't, I wouldn't give this to little kids, right? But still, I think. Which actually, I kind of have a question about the origin of Pocket. Like, we had neighbors a while ago, and they bought Wingspan. He was an engineer, she was a med tech, and we eventually had to have, like, come over, we'll teach you Wingspan. And they would look at each other and go, oh, that's how that works. And so that was kind of funny. So it feels like there were a lot of people who jumped on Wingspan, like my neighbors, who really couldn't get through to it, right? And it feels like part of what Pocket is doing is letting your friendly neighborhood birder who's like, I just want something with birds in it, to actually have a good time. And so I know that you were talking with the COO and, like, maybe Elizabeth and somebody else, and saying, hey, was that part of the discussion, or did this come from something entirely different?
That certainly was a big part of it. Yeah. What we have a sense that there are lots of copies of Wingspan on people's shelves that are either still in shrink wrap, or they've been opened and people have looked at the birds, or maybe played it once and had a really good friend like Joe or James. One of you has guided them through a game, but then they didn't play it for a while and it's just too daunting to get back into. And so that was a major motivation. How can we make a game that has a much smoother onboarding process so that they can play with these birds, and maybe then later take a step up to Wingspan, or maybe just play Wingspan Pocket from time to time. That was a major impetus behind it. Yeah.
Yep, that makes good sense. Because I think I would imagine that as a publisher, because the same thing happens to me as a writer, is like, it's great that you buy my book, but I'd really like for you to actually have a good time reading the things, right? Or playing the games, right? And it's like, it's cool, great, you bought the copy, that's awesome. But I also want you to we made this experience for you. I think it's going to be a good time, but give it a go. But then you look at all the stuff in the box of Wingspan and think, ooh, which goes where? Wingspan Pocket. Put out the cards, rattle the eggs a little bit, and away you go.
Yeah. It's been kind of surprising to me to see how quickly people are actually playing Wingspan Pocket too. Like, I think there are a lot of games that people receive, including myself, where it might sit on the shelf for a little while before I get to it. But I've seen so many photos on social media, and really so many ratings on Board Game Geek. So with just like a month into the game being shipped to people, so it's clear that people are finding it very easy to get to the table. And I'm trying to right now think a lot about what the lessons are for me to take away from that, and try to emulate that in other games and potentially future Pocket games.
Well, I saw in the lobby of a hotel at Indianapolis, somebody was sitting there at the high table and like, we just bought this 20 minutes ago. We're about halfway through. You want to watch? So yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was going to remark that James saw a number of spontaneous Pocket trainings while he was at Gen Con.
Yep.
Yeah. Last time we had you on, you accidentally had a box in the background that you didn't mean to have, that we didn't notice because you were, a little starstruck, I think. Now that we should be paying attention to is there. I think it was apiary at the time.
Well, yeah. The only one that's on my shelf that we have not released is Namiji, which is the the third game or second or third, it's our third game in the Tokaido line. I don't know what the original release date was. So that's there. I haven't revealed what's unique about it, but I think people probably know it's mostly just going to be the original Namiji, but with some accessibility and onboarding upgrades.
I see.
Great.
Well. Yeah. So that'll be available in about 2 months. But no other secrets and surprises back there.
We did enjoy Libertalia as well.
Good.
We need more pirate games that feel piratey.
Yeah.
I want to just make sure we're at the 30-minute mark, so we should turn you loose, I believe. If that was the plan, right?
Yeah. Of course, if there's any other big topics that you wanted to talk about, I'm happy to chat about them for a few minutes. Anything else on your mind?
Well, I'm just always grateful when you come on. Now that you've done it twice, we might ask you back a third time, but we'll wait a couple of years again. I don't know. No, I mean, I think just with what you've got going on, I mean, looking out on the horizon, is there any kind of thing that you're really excited about that you think is going to happen towards the latter part of the year or early next year? Obviously, without giving away any two spoilers, but just something you're really excited about that's really filling out the pipeline for you.
There are some projects that I'm really excited about. I think one approach that we're taking to 2027 and it could potentially bleed over into 2028 is and this is going to sound maybe like we don't normally do this for our games, but we really do try to take the time to get our games right before we release them. That is always our goal. But I would say even more than usual with these games that we're releasing in 2027, I had a picture in my head of when they were going to be available, and they're taking longer than expected. But I don't see that as a delay. I see it as we're taking the time it'll take to make these games really, really great. So that's been on my mind a lot lately as I see this schedule shift a little bit. But it makes me even more excited to release the games when they're ready. So I have nothing to reveal at this time regarding those games. But we have 2 games in particular, and then a Wingspan expansion. And the Wingspan expansion is the one thing that is good to go. That one's great. It's these other games that are taking a little extra time, but I think the final result is going to be pretty incredible.
Now, is that because of the design and the production process, or is it also due to the supply chain process? Because I know you've written extensively about the impacts of tariffs, and you've been very prolific about that, and even had taken some different actions along the way. Not trying to get any political or controversies there, but I'm just kind of curious, is that kind of elongated the process in terms of design and production and then ultimately getting it to market? Or is that just sort of been, other than the cost, it's been a non-issue?
Other than the cost, it's been a non-issue. Yeah. For these products, I'm looking at the design and the development of the game and trying to get the game to the place where playtesters are like itching to play the final version of it. And one of them is in that stage. The other one is in the graphic design stage, and I don't think it's tied to tariffs or anything like that. But like one thing that happened recently is I think Adobe discontinued their 3D software.
Okay.
This is the software that we use for like the 3D model of the board that you see in the setup. And I don't know if Adobe realized quite how disruptive this is, because it means that we have to completely, or not me, my graphic designer has to completely relearn a new piece of software. Which is not easy. Like the 3D software is not simple. And so that's literally what's happening this week, and has been happening over the last 2 weeks for a specific project that we're working on. Yeah.
I can say that in my professional life, I deal with that organization as well. And
Okay.
I feel your pain.
Let me ask you guys, if you don't mind. So one change that has happened since we last talked is that I have a podcast now, the Positively Board Gaming Podcast, with my friend Mitchell. And we record once a week. We have a lot of fun with it. It's around a 30-minute podcast. Any advice or anything that you've learned that has kept this podcast fun for you for so long? I don't see this waning, but I'm having so much fun with it. I want to try to sustain it.
Well, I'll tell you from my point of view. Obviously, I think we told you a little bit about how James and I got reconnected and how we knew each other in college. So I won't go through that story ad nauseum. I think our biggest challenge is, and I've talked about this on the podcast, is that I'm a lazy podcaster. I enjoy the conversation. I'm a very social person. And then I tended to be the person that wanted to let the perfect get in the way of the pretty good. And that was always delay in getting episodes out on time. And we would build this backlog, and it would be like, oh, James, I promise I'm going to get it out, and it was just this my wife calls it eating the frog. You don't want to eat the frog that day, which is I don't want to edit the podcast that day. So for me, the biggest ease of that has come through the fact that we use Riverside, not a sponsor. Riverside is a platform that has a lot of, I hate to use this phrase, but I'm going to use it, AI tools that that do really make it easier for me because it automatically puts the bumpers where I want it. It edits out the air, like if we're all staring at each other and nobody's thought of anything to say, like happened just a few minutes ago, it takes care of all that and compresses it. It does sort of sound balance as well. Again, I'm not selling the product, but for me, that has made the discomfort go away so I can focus on the fun. I like the kinds of questions that we want to ask when we have somebody on, the kind of games that we want to talk about when we don't have somebody on. And that for me has just trying to make it as, this is really the answer to your question. I'm sorry I'm being long-winded about this, is making it as frictionless as possible from a technical perspective so that it can be fun. That's my point of view. James, I don't know how you would answer that.
Just having fun. I mean, I think it sounds like now I have to find your podcast and subscribe because that's clearly the next thing I'm going to do immediately as we're off this. But I also think the kind of, I mean, knowing the stuff that you post, the ways that you engage the industry as well as audience, I mean, the problem I think for people might be that they're not curious enough. And they're like, I'm just going to talk about this thing and like box themselves in very quickly and or just lose interest. And I doubt that's going to happen. You strike me as a very engaged, curious person about a lot of things. So yeah, just keep going with that.
I like that. And that is something that we encountered a few months in. We had developed a structure, and then we realized we actually realized that once we ended each conversation and then we had like another, like Mitch and I would just like talk for 10 minutes off air, that was usually the funniest, most fun part of the conversation. And so I was like, why don't we just remove this structure and just talk to each other for a while? Like we don't need to have I will go into what it was, but it was like, it was meant to be fun, but it was a little bit too structured. And so we moved this banter, instead of being off air, we moved it to be the beginning of the conversation. And then we'd move in to talk about games for the last 20 minutes usually. And that worked out great. So we're trying to be aware of things like that as we go.
Yeah. And I think that flexibility, and because again, in writing, the idea is like no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, no whatever, joy in the writer. Blah. So it has to be fun for you or it's going to suck for everybody. Yeah. And I think letting the structure shift as your needs and interests shift is key. Saying, no, this is the structure of our, like, that's death.
And James has been a very generous co-host this past year. My wife and I have gone through a home expansion, which means that our house has been chaos, which means we haven't got nearly as much gameplay in 26 that we would have liked, but now everything is kind of returning to normal. So we're getting back to the table. And then on top of that, I didn't have enough nerd hobbies. So I took up ham radio and I've been learning Morse code for the last year. And there is a gamification of ham radio called Parks on the Air, where you try to contact people and they try to contact you and there's points and stuff. So we've sort of been able to talk a little bit about that on the podcast, but mostly James has been carrying the water about games that have been played and stuff like that. But we're hoping to balance that back out. And I think having that co-host that can kind of fill the gap when, whether it's writer's block or a dry spell, which is kind of what I look at in that regard. That's been nice too, to kind of keep it going. Cause we don't have a large audience. We don't try to be that, mega podcast, but we do have an audience and people do, reflect on some of the things that we say. And so it's important that we try to show up for those folks.
That's great. I like the idea of leaning on each other and as your personal life is certainly affected. And yeah, I've seen that in my podcast a little bit too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys for the advice. I appreciate that.
Thanks for asking.
You're still having fun with it.
Yeah, I know it's always a pleasure to get together with you and see you and talk to you about what's going on in the industry and talk about a lot of different projects and topics that are going on. So we just appreciate you being so generous and being willing to come back. And James and I are planning on both trying to be at Gen Con next year. So hopefully we'll see you in person at some point, maybe not there, somewhere else. But hopefully you'll be willing to come back sometime in the near future as well and have another conversation with us.
I would be honored to. Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. Well, James, we're gonna end it here, and as per usual, I am Joe Mahaffey. I'm not bored. I am board gaming.
I'm James Egelhardt. I hope that all your tiebreakers break your way.
Thanks again, Jamey.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
In a world of cardboard.